like I said, I spent about 16 years at Sprint, and I have been at Accenture now for about 6 years. And those of you who don't know Accenture, it's a global technology firm, and we have offices literally around the globe. But the work that I'm going to be showing you here today has been done, are things that I have worked on over the last year, but they aren't necessarily the finished products, because I've definitely scrubbed some of the information to protect our client interests. So I wanted to start off with just a baseline understanding of what we mean by each one of these experience platforms. We hear about extended reality a lot, and I'll probably use XR a lot when I'm talking this evening as kind of a global umbrella of AR, MR, and VR, because it's a little bit easier to say that than all three of those at one time. So XR is how we describe all of these experience options and the underlying technologies that support them. AR is where we can use our phones to see something projected so that it looks like something in real space. MR provides Snapchat filters where we can interact with our image and have things projected onto it. You'll see mixed spaces where there are virtual components and real components merged together. Another example of this is if you are having a conversation with someone and you're in VR and they're not, and you can see everything that they're doing and they can see everything that you're doing. VR is that fully immersive experience where you have a headset on and you are completely engaged with your experience. So I've just kind of listed a few different companies here that have good examples of each one of those different types of experiences. And just so you know, for some reason, I can't see the chat anymore because I'm doing screen share. So if there is a question, somebody's going to need to let me know as we go through.
I can do that.
Thank you.
I'll keep an eye on it. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay. So what I really want to do is kind of draw the correlation between these different technologies and experiences and designing for what we may be used to as far as predominantly web and mobile applications. Is that with VR, with XR, these are social engagements. It's really designing for these is really more like designing an entertainment experience. I'll get into that a little bit more later, but the primary kind of ahas I've had from the opportunities that I've worked on in the last year or so fall mainly into kind of these two categories. For the most part, they're not meant to be an individual experience. They are meant to be shared experiences. Even with Pokemon Go, you share it with the people that you're battling with when you're standing around at the park. With Snapchat filters, you screenshot or take videos to share them with your friends. In XR, the intention is to engage and participate in activities with others. This has much more in common with designing for entertainment than the traditional design work that we're used to doing. Another aspect is why people are using these tools. It's not just about accomplishing a task or achieving a goal. It's about doing those things in a fun and engaging way. We are using these technologies in meaningful ways where there's so many different opportunities for trainings to be conducted in using any of the XR technologies, and we're able to engage with colleagues and others in work settings. We're doing those things, but the atmosphere is changing around how we do that. It's intended to be a little bit more relaxed, social, and enjoyable as we're going through and experiencing these platforms. So although we may be thinking through the experiences that we need to design, we need to understand how we can use the technology to aid us in providing that experience. The questions that I have here about the narrative and the interaction are ones that I'm sure many of you ask with every new design challenge that you're working on. We need to have these types of baseline understandings to ensure we're creating an experience that is going to meet the needs of our project. that's no different in using any of the XR technologies as well. Similarly, when we think about, platform considerations, be it a mobile app, be it web, be it a custom hardware, we're going to have some of those very, very similar conversations with our development teams, so that we make sure that we understand what we have, what's our playground, what do we have to work with. Where I found the challenge was looking at the current experiences today using XR technologies, is that part of it has to do with the fact that I'm not much of a gamer. I don't watch a lot of television or movies. So I don't have as much cursory engagement with entertainment as many other people do. So it's something I really needed to research and study. So in designing for an XR space, we're going to get into some of these additional elements that we need to consider when we're thinking about how we need design for an XR experience. One is spatial engagement. This is the fact that people can look up, they can look down, like look left, look right, they can turn around, look behind them, they can move around in the environment in any of those directions. And you need to make sure that you have accounted for that. Wayfinding can also be very different within these spaces. We don't have traditional navigation structures that we're accustomed to with mobile and web to take advantage of. We may need to look more at game design and how users navigate throughout those spaces. We need to make sure that we're still able to get our users where they need to be. Proximity is one that I found very interesting, and I did a lot of research on some of the science behind proximity and personal space. So the categories of space that I have here are based on many social experiments and studies that have been done showing that your personal space is about a meter, within a meter of your body. And then your social and engagement space is between 1 to 3 meters from your body. And then your public space and extended space is really about 4+ meters out. So as we're going through and we're looking at engagements and how we would like people to interact within a virtual environment, we need to keep those things in mind. So as far as audio goes, I'm sure most of us have had the experience where you have audio input coming from your web browser and you have no idea which tab it's on. So thankfully, we now have a little visual indicator that lets us know which tab that audio is coming from so that we can shut it off. But audio input is really, really crucial in many XR experiences. It gives you a lot of feedback to if you're doing something correctly or incorrectly in the environment. It enhances the overall experience and makes it more engaging and immersive. So we need to account for and include audio as a part of our overall design considerations. So another aspect is, as we've come accustomed to designing for keyboard or touchscreen inputs, now we have an additional layer that we need to take into consideration, and that is the 3D controller. Seems like it's become an attachment lately. Many of the environments that we're designing for XR experiences are actually designed for more than one platform. So there are some that are just for laptop or mobile devices. There are other that are specifically for laptops or headset experiences. And then there are others that are intended to work on all three. So we need to make sure that as we're going through our design process, we understand what tools that our users are going to be using when they engage in our environment. Lastly, I wanted to really call attention to the fact that for the most part, when we're designing like a shopping app, you're thinking about one person completing a task, moving through a series of events to completion. But that's not the case in most XR experiences. Many are very social by nature. They're intended to be shared. I know I keep talking about this, but it is important. And we need to account for that when we're thinking through our design about multiple people engaging in the experience at the same time. I'm going to pause right there and see if there were any questions so far. Okay.
All right. No, nothing yet.
No worries. I'll keep moving. So now I want to talk A little bit more about the storyboarding approach that I have been taking in creating some of these experiences. So many of you are probably already using storyboard techniques when you're thinking through a user journey. They're very helpful in the fact that they help us walk through a sequence of events. I know I've watched more than one documentary on how a television show or a movie was made, and you see all of the storyboards up all over the wall. It's very common in the entertainment industry. And just like wireframes, our storyboards help make sure that everyone is on the same page and following the same vision. And just like wireframes and other types of design, we start off with a low fidelity and then move to a higher fidelity. So these are some of the components that I make sure that I include in all of my storyboards. So we have the summary and the purpose of the interaction to help make sure that we understand what the goal of the experience is. Beats was a new term for me. It really means each moment. And I'll show you some examples of what beats are as we move through some of the examples I'll be sharing later. But as I mentioned before, illustration is one of the hardest parts for me. I do not have a background in UI design. I have never been a visual artist, and I don't think I actually was like thinking back, I don't think I've taken an art class since elementary school. So at first, when I started doing this work, I just started by writing out the story I wanted to tell and then going back and creating illustrations to support it. But overall, I think I'm getting better at it. I know I'm never going to be an artist, but what's important is that the illustrations I create help make sure everyone has the same understanding of the interaction that needs to be created. Lastly is a time breakdown. So this doesn't apply to every experience, but I have found that keeping track of about how long you think something is going to take really helps with the overall story that you are creating, especially in some of the things that we're doing in VR, where we have to be very conscious about how long we're keeping someone in a headset. Then we're going to move on to, the detailed storyboards. And I wanted to bring up who we are creating them for. So once we've gone through the process of creating low fidelity, getting with the extended team, getting everything reviewed, modified, and improved, we move on to creating those more detailed storyboards. And I look at these much like I do a user journey map. The explanatory components are just changed. So as we're thinking about who is going to be consuming our storyboards and the information that we need to communicate, it really is going to be depending upon the type of project that you're creating. But you'll definitely be working with visual artists with a wide range of skills, everything from concept illustration to 3D artists. We also work a lot with sound designers, and we need to communicate with them about the overall environment and specific sounds that we may be expecting throughout the activities. And just like any other development team we meet, we need to make sure that we give them all of the information they need in order to be able to create a seamless experience. So I'm going to jump into a couple of examples. I've brought two to share with you today. First, we're going to look at a mixed reality example. So I realize this might be a little bit hard to see, but we have our summary and purpose up at the top of the screen. This particular design was intended to be on a mobile device, so it's got a little bit more of that typical phone form factor. And we have 5 beats here within this experience. The purpose of this storyboard was to get the baseline concept reviewed and approved by a client before we moved into a development phase. So we have my lovely illustrations here depicting the experience of searching for furniture pieces that will fit within a real world space. And as we move through the beats, you'll see that the user starts out with a blank space. They add furniture to it. They can manipulate the grid plane to view it from different angles. And then they can also increase the overall size of the grid displayed. And in doing so, everything becomes smaller so you can see it on the screen. And then they can continue to add additional pieces. So this storyboard allowed us to have a conversation with our development team to ensure that the technology platform that we were going to be using was capable of the activities that we wanted to do. or if there were even some additional functions or features within the platform that we needed to try to take advantage of. So it also, helped us align with our clients so they really understood our vision and get agreement before we moved into that more detailed design phase and then to prototyping. With the more detailed wireframe storyboard here, it really looks more like an annotated wireframe. So, it's not a big stretch from that. So we continue to move forward with the story that we had defined previously, and we're calling out some of the specific elements that need to be individually manipulated and how we expect them to be able to be controlled by the user. So fortunately, because we did take this all the way to the prototype stage, I do have a little video of our prototype that I can share with you. So playing, yep, there we go. So as you can see here, this video is from a laptop view, but the prototype was on a mobile device. And we are showing how the users are able to add pieces of furniture, manipulate the plane, rearrange the furniture, and adjust the size of the grid throughout the video. And then they can continue to add furniture pieces to it or swap out entire furniture sets. And since there's probably some tech folks on here, I made sure to include here what technology was used in order to build this particular prototype. So we took this prototype and we conducted unmoderated user testing where the users were accessing the prototype on their mobile devices with a recording of the screen and then a video of the participant. We ran it through 7 users and we got some great insights on how they attempted to manipulate the plane, where they were successful, where they were unsuccessful, and they gave us some great feedback on the overall selection and placement process. So, like I said, we've got where you can zoom in, zoom out, you can tap on an individual item. Here we've swapped to a completely different set. We're able to zoom in and out on the touch screen, change the size of the plane that we're working with, and then add and adjust different furniture pieces. It was really cool to get to do that from start to finish, where you got to go all the way through user testing. So now I have my virtual reality example. We get into my art skills. So for this virtual reality example, I've made up a new experience for us to talk about today. So we have our purpose statement of helping a friend take care of their dog. And then we have 5 beats that are going to help us tell this story. Hopefully you can see this a little bit better than the last one, but we've got our little avatar person in the first frame who's approaching a house. They know that they need to find the hidden key in order to take care of their friend's dog. So we start looking around. We look under the doormat, look under the frog statue. We can see that there's a dog now in the window, and it's kind of hard to see, but he's barking now in the 3rd frame. And we've also got a little trigger of the gnome watching you suspiciously. So we've also got some, as we walk through, you find the key and then you're able to unlock the door and enter in the space. So in addition to just like the basic overall structure of the storyboard, we've also got some things like up at the top right, we've put some potential consequences or behaviors that might take place. And then down at the bottom right, we've got kind of some next steps about where we might be going with this in the next scenario. So we've got a few little things on the notes down below, the captions, we talking about some of the concepts about what could be an interactable element, where we've introduced the auditory element of the dog barking, and yeah, just kind of gone through that whole flow. So when we go through this, we get it approved with the extended team. I wanted to share a little bit more with you about how that team structure may look and how it's different from what we may be used to when we're working with mobile applications and websites. So for this particular project that I worked on, we completed it in about 4 months. And you can see that we had a very large and amazingly talented creative team. We had 2 creative directors with backgrounds in theme park design, managing the overall concept. Because of the timeline of the project, they were working very closely from the beginning with the concept artists, us as the interaction designers, and the sound designers, kind of all at the same time as we were going through and creating the overall environment and the specific experiences. Once those things were pretty solid, the individual elements were started to be created by the 3D artists. And that includes everything from the landscape architecture, like how high does something need to be? How wide does a pathway need to be that we might need to go through? Then the individual elements were provided to the 3D modelers, texture artists who were creating that structure in the skin that would be applied to them to make them realistic. And then within the overall design. And then we also had the shader artists and the effects artists that would be looking at the overall environment, like where's the sun, where's the lighting, how is the sun coming through clouds, where are the shadows of the trees going to be. All of that got fed into our amazing development team, who were working with a very restricted platform. So they had to really work hard within the confines of the capabilities of that platform, and then they made all of the magic happen. Then we worked with our 2 QA leads who managed the overall test cases and load performance. But we all got in there and did overall UAT and load testing. So, you know, there were a lot of times when we were getting in the environment and testing things and checking things out, and this feels too close, this feels too far away, I can't read that, we need to make it bigger, we need to make this smaller because it's obtrusive. But it was really amazing, wonderful experience. And we did do this all in an agile process. So what we did was we focused on one small section of the environment at a time. And so we would start, we were able to hand off our designs iteratively to the rest of the team members, and then be able to circle back and go through the QA process with everyone as well.
Tamara, we did have one question in the
Yes.
chat. Daniel asked or said he was curious how much deliberation did it take to get from the concept storyboard to having something you could actually test?
So, for example, one of the aspects that we had was basically kind of a billboard type of experience within the platform. And we very quickly provided information guidance to the development team. They actually started working on it before the visual design team did, so that they could start making sure that we had the technical capabilities of creating these information points that would open and close. I would say that each area of the experience would take a couple of weeks to do. There were some that were more complicated that took a lot longer than that, but then there were a lot of other elements that didn't take as long. So for example, in my example that I provided, it doesn't take as much time necessarily to create the form factor of a bush that is going to be kind of mostly static, but maybe move a little bit in the wind, versus the dog that might be moving around a little bit more within the environment. And you have to take into account more behaviors that it might take. But it was we really had the best of the best from the development team on this particular project. They were using mostly Unity, and they did an amazing job of cranking a lot of things out really fast.
Thanks. While we're on that subject, does anyone else have a question they wanted to ask at this point?
Hey guys, this is Lydia. I have a question. I noticed that you said, or I see under 3D artists that there was a level designer, and then I know you talked about with the creative directors, one of them was like helped in theme parks. I'm just curious if anyone else on the team had that background in either amusement park design or game design?
Yes. So yeah, both of our creative directors came from a very large theme park company that everybody would recognize the name. And they also did a lot with movie design as well. So it really is pulling in the entertainment. A lot of our 3D artists were actually they were 3D artists, and they had worked in other 3D areas before coming into working in virtual reality. So and the Unity developers, the two of them I know did some game design previously as well, did some game development previously as well.
Super cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
There
Okay.
was one more question that came in.
Yes. What technology are we using? So from design, we were just use Figma for the most part. A little bit of Illustrator, something for the art. The concept artists, they were using Illustrator. The 3D artists were mostly using Blender. And then everything was developed in Unity and then published to the platform, the custom platform that we were using.
Thanks. That's it for the question.
All right. So as I told you before, I really look at, storyboards a lot like I do journey mapping. So in order to help us with this communication process, the storyboards were built out a little bit more so we could document the direction from the creative directors, for the illustrators and the sound designers, even though a lot of this was going on in parallel. It was important for us to document it so that as we moved into the development and testing phases, all aspects of the experiences were documented in a single location so that we could create the user stories for the development team, and QA was able to use that information also to develop their test cases. So we were all getting in there. Everybody was getting into the Figma files, updating things as things were going on. We had a separate art file where the illustrators were publishing their concept art for the 3D artists and the texture artists to go in and pull the concepts from. So one of the things that is near and dear to my heart is usability testing. And I know I mentioned it a little bit earlier about the usability testing that we did for the furniture arrangement prototype, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about the value that we got from usability testing with the virtual reality project. In both experiences, the MR and the VR one, we had a wide range of participant skill levels within these XR technologies. And one thing that was repeatedly interesting was that these skill levels varied significantly, even within similar demographic groups. So you really need to make sure when you're looking for participants for your usability testing that you are getting a broad range of participants within your target audience. MR stands for mixed reality. So that's a blend of more than one thing. So through the testing, one of the things that we uncovered, so there were a lot of themes that we found. Here are three of the primary themes. So one is that it's important to set the expectations for your users so that they can enjoy the experience more. Even though on both of these, we didn't intend to have a hyper-realistic experience, users were still comparing this experience to others that they had had in the past, and that really did color their opinions. Another one of the really interesting findings that we had was over the social concerns within the virtual reality environment. Participants were sometimes hesitant to move within the environment without being instructed to do so, and they were really concerned about invading other people's spaces. So for the VR, all of our testing was done using the Quest 2. And then lastly, it really helped us to identify some basic concerns about being in a VR environment. You know, one of those things is to make sure that we kept the sessions to less than 10 to 15 minutes for beginners. It's really easy for people to get motion sickness when they're not used to being in a virtual environment for very long. We also were able to understand some of the behaviors that we needed to modify. So we eliminated some of the movement behaviors that would have required somebody to bend over and pick something up because it was very disorientating to them. And so that was really helpful for us to understand from a design perspective as well. And then we also made sure that we provided some additional motion sickness precautions for our in-person event. So this list isn't exhaustive. It's just a few that I felt like were really key to think and keep in mind as we're going through and designing for XR. You know, I touched on it earlier, but your users might be engaging with your experience from a mobile phone, from a computer with a keyboard, or from a headset environment. And each one of those is going to have their own set of controls that you're going to need to take into consideration. It could impact you being able to actually complete a task if you don't keep in mind that users that are using a keyboard are having to just kind of navigate around, and they don't have all of the trigger and the selection opportunities that you have within a controller. And within touch environment, you have a lot of like pinching and zooming, and you have a little bit more flexibility than you do with a keyboard. And the other thing is to make sure that as you're designing your interactions and the overall environment that you're providing your users support throughout their experience. It's not necessarily about having a menu available when where they can go and figure out where they are or maybe jump to another location. It's about making sure that they have access to simple things like how to navigate their environment, how to interact with objects, making it clear where they can and can't go, and making sure that they have the visual, auditory, and tactical feedback necessary to help them move throughout the experience. Whew. All right. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I hope that everybody has, been able to take away at least one thing from our conversation. And with that, open to any other questions that you might have.
Hey, Tamara, this is Lydia again. I
Hi.
did miss the first part, so you probably already went over this. Would you
Yes.
mind sharing your background really quickly, like where you come from, your degree?
Yeah. So actually, it's kind of funny. My degree is actually in political science, communications, political science, and philosophy.
Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's definitely, I'm going to stop sharing so I can see everybody better. Yeah, there we go. I kind of was joking with Dan, Sean earlier, where I get people ask me, is like, what's your background? How did you get into doing UX design? And I tell people that a long time ago, far, far away, there was this thing called the World Wide Web. And it got a graphical user interface. And so since I came from print, where we learned a lot about design and how to communicate to our users using print materials and mediums, I started working with websites when they were like, literally hot off the presses. And so, yes, I was one of those people that designed a website with too many fonts at one point in time and too many colors. But we all learn from our mistakes, and hopefully you all have learned from those as well. And then I, continue to work on websites, working at Sprint, and then moved into the mobile technologies, and then have just made it a point to continually learn and stretch myself in figuring out how we can use the emerging technologies to better create experiences.
I love that. That's so cool. And where do you work at now?
Right now I work for Accenture.
Accenture. Okay, awesome. Cool. Thank you. This has been awesome. I love this.
Great. Jerry.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Wow, it sounds really cool. I kind of forgot what my question was. Oh yeah. So at my previous job, I built occasionally we would pitch an idea where it's like we build like a Snapchat filter or
Mhm.
Instagram filter. And these projects seem like pretty big, obviously a lot of hands in different departments. You mentioned agile.
Yeah.
Do you have experience working on smaller projects or medium-sized projects, or any insight on the differences between those? Obviously, I mean, we can extrapolate like the differences in working on a small versus a big website. It's probably very similar, but any insights on that?
Yes. And before I answer, what I want to do is like, I would really appreciate feedback from everyone. So if there's something that really jumps out in your mind of something that you felt was really useful, that I shared with you today, or if there was something that you felt like was like really old news, please share that with me as well. And Jerry, like I said, I've done a couple of small AR projects. Those are usually the ones that have been a little bit smaller that I've worked on. And obviously it's the duration and the skill sets within the different team members. So generally I come at it more from an experience or interaction perspective. And then we would have multiple specialty artists that would work within, like you said, within the Snapchat filters. There are certain, I know that since I don't do that line of work that much, I know there are very specific tools that make that much easier to do. And so we just make sure that we had the people on our team that had those skill sets. With the MR prototype, that was a small team. It was me, a visual designer, and a developer. And we were able to build and construct that prototype in about little over 3 weeks. And then of course, this much larger virtual reality experience that had about 6 different areas in it, took about 4 months and a heck of a lot more artists than we did on any of those other projects.
Hey guys, it's Lydia again. Another question I had for you is just, you mentioned like always staying up to date and always trying to like always learn. What are some of the resources that you're relying on, or what are some of your favorite go-tos?
I usually go down rabbit holes. I will, when I was very first starting to look at designing an experience for VR, I did a lot of, I like doing research. It's something that I enjoy doing. It can be a little bit overwhelming and taking in so much information, but I did a lot of research on game design, video game design, primarily. And I looked at what the common behaviors were within video games so that I could see which aspects of it we may want to leverage within our experience and which were maybe a little bit less relevant. So I do a lot of crazy searches, something that just comes up in mind. I couldn't find a lot on just designing for VR, which is one of the reasons why everything seemed really technical and really aimed more at the developer side of things. And so that's where I kind of felt like I had to just try it out. And that's where I started leaning on the entertainment industry, because there's so many parallels that it just really made a lot of sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense, especially diving into the game design world. I love that. Like there's
Yeah.
no really book on this yet. So we have to just look at all these kind of parallel industries and from there cobble together like, oh, does this work? Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah. It's kind of funny, Jerry. I mean, he's asking everyone, hopefully not just me, so everybody else put your favorite video games in there. I said I'm not a gamer. I have played Animal Crossing. I've watched a lot, my daughter play a lot of Zelda, and some of the more story-based games. I personally, I'll watch those. I enjoy those because it's got something a little bit more interesting for somebody as an observer to kind of engage in. So, and Lydia says Outer Wilds, The Long Dark. Awesome.
I have a rabbit hole sort of question. a lot of my research as of late has to do with comparing and modeling behavioral patterns in a visual way, just as sort of a reference library. So I'm curious, in your journey mapping, if you found that those confirmed uh, patterns in behavior or informed them to a greater degree as they were compared to how people actually interacted with your journey map.
I think that really what I'm going to go back to is some of the usability testing that we did. There were a lot of things that we really expected to find, and we did. You know, we knew that we needed to keep people in the environment, but in a short period of time. But we wanted to kind of test that and see what other parameters might be influencing that. So somebody who does a lot of gaming may have a little bit more tolerance for being in an environment where the environment and your first person vision is moving around a lot more than somebody who has not done a lot of gaming, either in VR or out of VR. And I think that observing people as they are engaging in those environments gave like I said, gave us a lot of information about how concerned they were with, like I said, there was just so much concern about being polite and having good etiquette. And we didn't talk about etiquette before we had the users go into the space. But when they came out of it, I mean, watching them interact and behave within the environment, and then them verbalizing that when they came out of it was very interesting.
So they carried a social framework in with it and came out with more of a group social framework.
So what we did is we had individuals, we were all co-located, but we were separated so you couldn't like hear each other in real life and in VR. We had a moderator who was remote, who joined us in VR, and our tech who joined us in VR. For some of the experiences, it was a guided experience, like one-on-one guided experience. And then in the second round of testing that we did small groups. So between 3 and 5 participants, plus myself, the moderator, and the tech lead. And they were all very cautious about how they engaged within that environment. And that was across the board. You know, you had the people who I knew had more experience in VR. They were a little bit more prone to maybe wandering around a little bit and trying to interact with things. But for the most part, the people that were in the group were carrying their social norms about proximity into the virtual space as well.
That's incredible. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought it was fascinating.
I want to, some people are having to drop off. And Tamara, I wanted to make sure we were respectful of your time. Do you need to go?
No, I'm good. And I have one other thing I was thinking about bringing up, just as a conversation starter, or something that, we might want to chat about at another time. But I'll wait and make sure that there aren't any other questions first.
I guess this is kind of like more of a product manager type of question, but I'm just curious, like how you identify the potential for bringing AR and VR into the product space. Like how are folks thinking about it when they're just getting at that conception phase? I think especially for like a lot of us who are in UX that's like more standard or traditional, like how could we even say like, oh, there actually could be some boundary breaking opportunities here?
I always fall, again, like I said before, I'm a laggard. And so I always fall on the side of just because you can doesn't mean you should. And so when I'm thinking about these types of engagements, I'm really looking for what's the meaning, what value is it going to add? How is it going to enhance the experience in a way that I can't do otherwise? Because with these technologies, because they are so new, you are putting a lot of burden on your users to learn to engage and interact with an experience. And so you've got to make sure the juice is worth the squeeze. And I think that there's a lot of instances personally, I brought it up a little bit about like entertainment. I think that it's amazing, some of the opportunities that are there. I'm sorry, not entertainment, training. It's amazing some of the opportunities there are in the training environment. So some of the examples are, you know, somebody might be working in a like an electrician. You know, what if somebody who was an electrician who was having to climb poles had the opportunity to work on and learn how to take apart a transformer in a safe way, in a safe environment, get those muscle memory skills embedded from being in a virtual environment, and then they go into the field and they have a lot more comfort and confidence in what they're doing. Training is, you know, especially in high risk areas, I think is a really huge opportunity. I had another idea. I had another one in my head. There were two. Oh, the meeting that we're having right now. Wouldn't it be great if we were all in a virtual space and I could give my presentation, and because we have the ability to have proximity audio, that if Dan and Sean got bored and they want to go talk about me, all they have to do is kind of move away and have a conversation. They can still hear, you know, because I would probably be in like a megaphone mode. They could still go have their little conversation and then come back and join the group without having to, you know, physically leave the space, right? You can have those kind of conversations in large groups. I've gone to some VR events with a couple of hundred people, and you can, you know, see your friend. You can go. You can say, hey, you know, you can step aside from the rest of the group, have a quick conversation without having to actually leave the event or the environment. And we weren't co-located. You know, most of the, I mean, I have to say, most of the people that I work with, I've never met in person. And it's been like that even since before the pandemic. But being in that virtual environment, you really feel more like you are together in a space.
That's really cool. I'm going to be looking around for opportunities now to kind of like imagine that in the real world.
Yeah, it's there. I mean, everything that you can think about anything and everything that you do, and does it apply? And is it going to add value to that overall experience? Any other questions yet? Okay. I can't believe nobody asked me about accessibility. There is a, you know, one of the things that is really fascinating to me is that we've got these technologies and they do open up a lot of doors. They open a lot of doors for people with mobility issues, because they can't necessarily go to environments. One of my favorite things to do is to go on Google Earth in VR, and you can literally walk through an environment as if you're there. And it's really cool. There are a lot on YouTube. There's a lot of 3D virtual reality tours. So having these kinds of virtual reality worlds really does open up an opportunity to experience things and events for people who may have mobility issues. But then conversely, what's virtual reality with someone with vision impairment? You know, there are a lot of there's a lot of research being done right now on how we can make virtual reality experiences meaningful for people who have low vision. Same thing with auditory concerns. There are a lot of things that are being done to improve voice to text, especially when you may have multiple inputs that are coming in. You know, you don't want to have a long string of garbled stuff, because it's picking up the auditory cues from like several different people who are talking all at once. You're going to have to figure out how to separate those audio cues and do voice to text separately, and maybe focus on the person that the individual is facing, as opposed to the people that may be tangentially in the environment. And then the other aspect of accessibility that find very, very fascinating is with neurodivergency. So you have some people that with neurodivergent issues, that having the ability to, like, for kids, maybe going into a virtual environment where they have a headset on, they have headphones on, it allows them to really, focus in on the task at hand, as opposed to being distracted by other things that might be going on physically in the space around them. But then it can also be really overwhelming, if it's not being in a virtual environment. It's immersive and it can be really overwhelming. So how do we find that balance, for people with any other kinds of diverse cognitive capabilities? So it's something that fascinates me. I don't know. I mean, it's a rabbit hole. Again, it's a rabbit hole. And I don't know a lot about it yet, but that's something that I'm really following and trying to understand more about.
Do you have any more questions?
I have one quick question.
Sure.
So for the virtual reality experience, sometimes the users feel the fatigue
Mhm.
because they're not used to the kind of long time in the virtual, and also like some people say they feel the headaches
Mhm.
while they are wearing the headset. So have you confronted those kind of situations, and how to deal with how to resolve those issues?
Yeah. I know it sounds simplistic, but one of the most important things that you can do is be hydrated. I know it sounds simplistic, but if you know somebody's going to be experiencing VR for the first time, make sure that they are well hydrated, because that really, really does help. Another thing that we do is we make sure that people, when they're first experiencing VR, I always have them sitting down. Swivel chairs are great, but I always make sure that they're sitting down. Another tip is to have a fan or an air source pointing at you, because that helps your body orient itself when it can't see the physical space. It helps your body orient you within your environment, your physical environment that you're in. And lastly, peppermint gum or ginger candies are great, because they are calming. They help your stomach, and they're calming for your stomach. So if you're feeling kind of like it helps prevent people from getting kind of those butterflies from being in the environment. And then lastly is, don't stay in there very long. 10 minutes max. First time, 10 minutes. And then you can gradually increase that time. I find that at about an hour and 45 minutes, 2 hours, that's my cutoff, but I've spent a lot of time building up to that, and so I usually have to say, it's like, okay, I need to take a break. And so if you are in a situation and you like, I just need to take a break, get up, go look out a window, walk around a little bit, give your body a chance to reorient itself before you go back into a VR environment.
Sounds great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, thank you everyone for sticking out this long. I hope that, this was helpful and beneficial. And like I said, I'll look forward to continuing our conversation.
Thank you so much for doing this and giving us this presentation and answering questions. I may, just before everyone goes, I may plug a few things. Dan put a link to join our Slack. We sort of have discussions ongoing in there. There's different channels, like to talk about what you're reading or working on, or job opportunities. KC Design Week, we're doing an event at that.
I registered for it. I can't wait.
Okay, great. I'll post that link in here, because Lisa posted recently about it. And for anyone that doesn't know about KC Design Week, there's a whole bunch of events you can sign up for. And I'll post that in the chat. And thanks everyone for coming. And we'll have a virtual, or no, an in-person happy hour in April. So be on the lookout for that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Cool.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thanks all.
Sean. Thanks, Tamara.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.